Hey everybody, Animal Man here. I'm at the primitive camp. This is my primitive lean-to shelter that's been here for I think probably two and a half years now. And I just wanted to show you a couple things that I made about 10 years ago. These are the first primitive arrows that I ever made as an adult. I used to make these as kids, but they were like, you know, flimsy little pieces of garbage compared to these. And even these are a far cry from what I'm able to do now. The level that I'm at now is far, far beyond this, but they're still really cool. And after I show them to you, I'm going to hang them up inside the wigwam as a decoration because they're just sitting at home collecting dust, doing nothing. I thought they'd fit in perfectly here. So before I hang them up, I'm going to show them to you. I'm going to tell you how I made them and just the history of these. So I know some of you know, probably some of you don't know about my history as far as going to professional survival school. I was trained at Tom Brown Jr.'s Tracker School, which is in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. That's their main camp that they call the primitive camp or grandfather's camp. And I went and took several courses there. And during my first course, I made these arrows. Actually, truth be told, I made 3 arrows. I have 2. The third one I hung up at a special place at that survival school called Grandfather's Camp. Grandfather was a Southern Lippet Apache elder that taught Tom Brown Jr. all of his survival and tracking skills. So Grandfather's Camp is a very special, it's like a sacred place there. And a lot of students make various works of art and kind of leave it there at Grandfather's Camp. So I left one of my arrows there. I took the other 2 home. And I just had these hanging up in the back room of my house, and I kind of forgot about them, honestly. So I'm going to show them to you. This one's been chewed by a mouse, probably. They're both made from scrub oak saplings that I cut at Grandfather's Camp, and I peeled the bark off, and then I fire hardened them and straightened them over a fire, and I greased them with rendered buffalo fat, and that kind of helps to preserve the wood. And then I knocked the ends. You can see that. See, there's a good contrast there. And then I fletched it with these turkey feathers that I found on the side of the road. And I used, this is Elk Sinew, which is tendon from either the back strap, or the leg. The sinew was given to me by my buddy Rourke, and it's from an elk that he shot. So I attached the turkey feathers to the arrow shaft with the sinew, and what you do is you basically chew on it and you moisten it with your spit, and after a while it gets saturated, and then you can wrap it on here very, very tightly, and then you kind of like smooth it with your fingers the same direction you wound it, and when it dries it really tightens and hardens up, and your spit interacting with the sinew ends up creating like its own glue. It's a very, very strong hold. The only problem is it's water soluble unless you seal it with something. Natives would usually seal it with like pine pitch. You'd have to have a pine pitch and mix it with white ash from the fire, and that's what they would use to seal it with usually. That's wrapped on there. A technique that I don't use very often now that I used on here, hopefully this will focus for you so you can see, is if you see the sinew kind of spirals through there, through the feather. If you don't glue the feathers on also, that's a technique to keep them laying flat against the arrow. Most of the arrows now I will use hide glue and glue them on, but this is a technique if you don't have that, or if you don't have time to do that. So on this end I have an arrowhead that I carved out of black walnut, also from Grandfather's Camp, and we were using this for various projects while we were there. And I have this HalfTiton with the pine pitch and white wood ash mixture that I was telling you about. And what you do is you attach it first with the pine pitch, smooth it out, and get exactly how you want it. And if you heat it up a little bit as you go, you can kind of soften it to make little adjustments, and you get it as straight as you can. You can see it's pretty darn straight still, and lined up this way as well. And then once it's where you want it, make sure it's all smoothed out, and then you will haft it on with the sinew as well. And you can see how that is tied on there with the sinew. You do it multiple directions so it's the strongest hold, and then that will bond it on there as well. And at this point, the sinew is the main thing holding it on there. But what the pine pitch does is, if you can see, it creates kind of a sloping transition. So if you did use this arrow when it enters an animal, it won't get stuck right here and mess up the arrow and have it all break apart. It'll hopefully continue its way through because it's got like a little ramp almost. So that's the way it's done, guys. And you may be saying to yourself, like, why did you use wood for an arrowhead? Why not stone? I do that too. Honestly, though, most native peoples did not use stone. And that's shocking to hear, I know. Most people don't believe it. The reason why is stone's a pain in the butt to work with. Not all areas have really good workable stone, but there's wood everywhere, there's bone everywhere, there's antler everywhere, and those three were the main arrowheads that Native American people used throughout the world, actually. And the reason why people don't know that is because wood, antler, and bone rots, and we don't really find them, but we find the arrowheads made of stone because stone does not rot. It might be busted up, but it's still there. But everyone thinks that they only use stone and that was the thing. It wasn't. This was far more common. They're both kind of disposable though. A stone head, if you take one shot with it, once it hits a bone, or if you miss and it hits a stump, it's done. It's going to shatter. Same with these. They're not going to shatter. I mean, they could if it hit a rib or something, but what's more likely to happen is it's going to just get dull, it's going to crack, it's going to get blunt, and then you're either going to have to replace it or you're going to have to reshave it down and go through the hardening process. And the hardening process that I used on this, it's like a 3-step process. So you shave it down how you want, and then you make it into an edge, and then you grease it with rendered fat. I used the buffalo rendered fat for this again that a friend gave me at Tracker School. And then you kind of toast it over the fire, and then what you do is you take something hard. I used a piece of quartz cobblestone that I found at grandfather's camp, and you rub the stone really fast and also putting pressure on it, and you compress those wood fibers down all around the edge of the arrowhead. That's called burnishing, and that can make a razor sharp edge. I mean, you can harden wood to the point using this technique that you can shave hairs off your arm with it. So, I mean, it'll cut you to the bone. That's how sharp you can get wood, and most people don't know you can do that with wood. Antler and bone, you can even make it sharper than that, believe it or not. So it's a pretty awesome technique to know. It's great for making knives. You can make arrowheads. You can make scrapers. You can do all kinds of things with it. Spear points. In my biggest YouTube video, I think, that has the most views, how to make a survival spear. That's what I did in that video also. It's the greasing, fire hardening, burnishing process. So this other arrow, a little bit different. Also a scrub oak sapling from grandfather's camp, tied on with the sinew, same technique, but this is goose feathers from a Canadian goose. The great thing about goose feathers for arrows, guys, as opposed to the turkey feathers on this one, is if I'm using this in the rain, and I wouldn't use these in the rain because I did not seal this sinew with pine resin, okay? But if I were, the turkey feathers, when they get wet, they all stick together and they lay down, and they do not work as well as fletching for your arrows. The goose feathers have an oil in them. As you know, geese love the water. So it's got a natural water repellent, and this will work as well dry as it does wet. So if you're hunting in the rain, these are your go-to. It's either goose feathers or duck feathers. They're both great in the rain. The other difference in this is the head. This head is made from deer antler, a chunk of deer antler. I brought this to camp with me to work on projects. It's from a local deer around here near my house. Found this antler in the woods, actually. And again, it's a different style head. I shaped it differently. I wanted to kind of play around, see what looked cool, see what I liked, what attached better. But I hefted it on the same way. And it's with the pine pitch resin, with white wood ash, and then with the elk sinew. And you can see the difference in the two arrowheads right there. A little bit different shape. But they both attached very, very well, and I'm very happy with both of them. So I'm going to go over and hang these in the shelter. I think I'm going to hang them kind of like this behind the deer skull. I think it'll look pretty badass. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed hearing about these and maybe learned a bit about about how to make arrows and all the little details that you have to keep in mind when you're making them. So thanks for watching. See you guys again soon.